Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my YouTube channel. I am your host, the Mighty Bjorn, and today for you folks, I have a new Warhammer 40k Wrath and Glory video. I'm going to be taking some time today and talking a bit about the Angry Shovel Boys, because I'm going to take time and discuss about two tanks that essentially came about because of the Death Korps of Krieg. Now, understand that both of these tanks served within the 500-year civil war on Krieg, and while another tank, not really a tank, more of a universal carrier or like a utility vehicle, such as the Centaur, is pretty noted for being used by the Death Korps of Krieg, there are some other tanks to discuss as well. Because, yeah, there's two more tanks that should definitely be, how would I want to put it, more notably used by the Death Korps of Krieg. So just kind of sharing some information, sharing some lore about said tanks. But before I get into that, folks, I just want to take time and I want to thank everyone for the support they've been giving my channel. The likes, the comments, the subscriptions, the shares, all that stuff helps bump me up in the YouTube algorithm. Also just want to take a moment to give a special shout out to my Patreon supporters. They provide the channel with additional support that helps me out, helps me in the sense of creating content and things of that nature. And for anyone that is interested, there's a link down below in my video description to my Patreon page. Good place to go to get updates and little snippets of things that are going to be coming to my YouTube channel sometime soon. I don't post all the time. I don't post extremely often, but I think I hopefully post often enough to make it worth everyone's while. Anyway, let's get into the meat and potatoes of today's video, and that's essentially talking about tanks. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is the Siegfried Light Tank. Now, there's not a lot of good images to really show with the Siegfried Light Tank, and that's primarily because it really didn't make its way to Warhammer 40k, but it was a part of Epic 40k. And there's actually supplements that has this vehicle because there was a supplement made for the Death Korps of Krieg for Epic 40k. Now, the vehicle itself was a replacement for the Sentinel. Essentially, as the Krieg Civil War went on and it turned into trench warfare, basically the Sentinel was found as not very useful. The terrain and everything else was just horrible for the Sentinel. The Sentinel also wasn't well armored. So Krieg, the Death Korps of Krieg, needed a vehicle that was going to be more usable for trench warfare, be just an overall more rugged platform. And essentially what was settled on was actually a utility tractor. This is actually the Land Crawler, which is a utility tractor. There's primarily two different variants that I'm aware of, but there's probably other ones. One of them, as you can see here, is kind of more or less a bulldozer, which is actually used by various engineering groups within the Imperium itself. But also there's another utility version that's used as a cargo transport. And even these vehicles actually even get used by the Imperial Guard, the Astrum Militarum, if you will. Now, I feel the concept of this was really realistically based on the Bob Simple tank, which is probably one of the worst tanks that was ever made. But essentially the idea is a country needed a tank, and the best thing they could come up with was up armor a farming tractor. And that's kind of what you get here with the Siegfried Light Tank. You get something very similar. Now, sitting there looking at the vehicle itself and looking at how it would be used, or kind of pondering about how it would be used, I feel the tactics would be the same as the FT-17 from World War I. Essentially, these vehicles would be used en masse. They'd be used as kind of like a cavalry tank, a faster moving tank that's lightly armored, not necessarily so much for infantry support or anti-armor purposes, but essentially it was an armored machine gun, and basically it would drive through the enemy lines. It would punch through, and then it would just kind of cruise around as fast as it could, marauding behind enemy lines. Kind of something like what cavalry would do. And even though this tank, as well as the Siegfried Light Tank, was lightly armored, it would protect the crew from small arms fire as well as shrapnel. So, yeah, logically speaking, it would be used in the Siegfried Light Tank would be used in a very similar manner to the French Renault FT-17. Now, when it comes to armaments and upgrades for the Siegfried Light Tank, well, it's only got one armament. I haven't found any information that suggests it has other armaments or can have other armaments, but generally speaking, it's got a turret-mounted multi-laser. A little bit better than a machine gun, but yeah, not too far away from being a machine gun, realistically. I guess an automatic laser, huh? Now, when it comes to upgrades itself, the vehicle can have many of the same upgrades as many other Imperial vehicles. Bulldozer upgrades, mine plows, smoke grenade launchers, searchlights, hunter-killer missile, all the good stuff, extra armor. So nothing really tremendous there. When it comes to the vehicle itself, honestly, nothing really tremendous, but it actually fulfilled a role that the Death Korps of Krieg needed, which was a more mobile, I guess you could say user-friendly vehicle for trench warfare compared to the Sentinel. Now, when it comes to the vehicle itself after the Krieg Civil War, there's not really a whole lot of blanks there, and it's kind of up in the air of what really happened to this vehicle. If it's one of those things that it just kind of just got forgotten, like that's not even produced anymore or used. But I like the idea that it would still be used as essentially a light tank by the Death Korps of Krieg, as well as maybe some other Imperial forces might actually find this vehicle to be an interesting vehicle for their use, such as the Valhalla Ice Warriors. Now, the next one I want to dive on into here today is the Ragnarok main battle tank. And, well, there it is, all looking KV2 like. Let me dive on into it here. Essentially, the Ragnarok is a replacement for the Lehman Russ. Essentially, as the Krieg Civil War went on and supply started to dwindle, especially on standard Imperial vehicles, the Death Korps of Krieg needed tanks to fill needed tanks to replace damaged Lehman Russ tanks. And they need to fulfill several roles. One, they need to be produced very quickly. Two, they need to be well armored. Three, they needed it to be well armed. Four, they need to be able to produce it indigenously. So let's go and get on into it here, because that's essentially where the Ragnarok tank was born. Now, when it comes to the vehicle itself, it is clearly inspired by the KV2. Actually, I've seen many people posting photos of KV2s that they had modified into Ragnarok tanks. And even when you look at the lore, yeah, it pretty much comes down to a Ragnarok tank. Or, sorry, the Ragnarok tank is a KV2. Sorry. Now, when it comes to armaments, it's armed with a battle cannon, usually a hull-mounted laser cannon, but I've also seen them with hull-mounted heavy stubbers. I've seen them with hull-mounted heavy bolters, and I've actually seen them with hull-mounted heavy flamers, but I've even seen them with no armament at all for the hull. So I've seen a widespread differences in the hull armament. Now, when it comes to the turrets itself, it's got two small turrets instead of side sponsons. The turrets, I've seen heavy bolters, I've seen heavy flamers, I've seen heavy stubbers, which is supposedly the standard, and I've even seen them with no side sponson turrets at all. And then, of course, when it comes to armament, it has a turret-mounted battle cannon. And I've only seen this with a turret-mounted battle cannon, and doing some digging and research, it seems like they only come armed with a turret-mounted battle cannon. Although, arguably speaking, they could probably take other armaments as well, such as maybe a demolisher cannon, maybe even, I think it's the Eradicator, Lehman Russ Eradicator. No, maybe it's the Exterminator, where it's got twin-linked laser cannons, and there's another Lehman Russ that's actually got twin-linked auto cannons, and then also the Conqueror cannon, the Vanquisher cannon. Uh, Personally, though, I would say that for the most part, they just went with battle cannons because that's what they could quickly and easily produce, as well as it allows for the standardization of ammunition shared across the tanks, as well as standardization of parts. Now, when it comes to the armament itself, well, as you can see, this thing is, or sorry, the armor. When it comes to the armor, you can see this is pretty similar to a KV2. Basically, big slab side armor. The armor plating is thick. That's what actually provides the armor protection over using angled armor, and that allows for the basically the hull, the turret, etc., to be quickly assembled, and even allows the vehicle to be assembled by low-skilled labor. Now, when it comes to upgrades, same as any other standard Imperial vehicle, searchlights, dozer blades, smoke grenade launchers. I believe this can take a hunter-killer missile. Not sure why you'd want one with the battle cannon, but you can take one. And other things such as additional armor, which the extra armor package would probably be something that was very commonly used by the Death Korps of Krieg. Now, when it comes to the tactics of this vehicle itself, generally speaking, it's an infantry tank. Big, heavily armored, slow moving. And in theory, my guess is it's probably an even slower moving tank than the Lehman Russ itself. Now, when it comes to after the Krieg Civil War, there is other planetary forces that have used these, including the Valhalla Ice Warriors. But these tanks themselves are, in general terms, are used as reserve tanks at this point. They're not really used much as frontline tanks, although they do see frontline service from time to time, basically during wartime scenarios where there is a general lack of Lehman Russ tanks available for use. Now, where I get in here with Warhammer 40k Wrath and Glory is technical field manual. I feel like I talk about this thing so often, but technical field manual actually has both these tanks available for use for your Warhammer 40k Wrath and Glory campaign. With that being said, you can go check this thing out, completely free to download from the Doctors of Doom website, as well as many other great supplements made from various creators that just want to support, show their support, and expand onto Warhammer 40k Wrath and Glory. But anyway, folks, I'm going to wrap up today's video at that. Hopefully you learned something about these two tanks that are actually used by the Death Korps of Krieg, as well as some other forces within the Imperial Guard. Anyway, folks, thanks again for tuning in, and have yourselves a wonderful day.